Hi, my name is Sarah Goedhart. I'm the winemaker here at Hedges Family Estate. We are coming to you today from our beautiful chateau on Red Mountain, and we would like to introduce a couple of wines that you'll be tasting today in our biodynamic tasting. We have our 2017 Hedges Estate Vineyard Biodynamic Syrah, and we also have our 2018 Hedges Vineyard Biodynamic Malbec. These are two delicious wines that we produce and grow biodynamically, and our friends at Blanc and Rouge wanted us to share a little bit about these wines. So we hope you enjoy the video and learn a little bit along the way. Cheers. How's everyone doing today? Good? Excellent. So we are going to go through a couple wines, but first I wanted to kind of give you guys a little background on biodynamics and how we do biodynamics here at the property. And also if you have questions, type them in and Kathy will kind of let me know what they are, and we can get those answered for you. So as many of you know, probably Hedges has been around for quite a while, since 1990, and we planted our first vineyards here in 1991 on Red Mountain. So we have about 120 acres now, and in 2021, so this year, we will be 100% certified biodynamic on all of our estate vineyards. So we're pretty excited about that. We have been kind of in this process since 2007, and it's a lot of hard work, a lot of learning. So to see all the estate properties certified is a big deal for us. So the reason we started farming biodynamically is we sort of felt like we had the opportunity as landowners to really treat the land well and keep it thriving for the future. We felt, you can't just keep taking from the land without putting back, getting good fruit from the land without giving back. So that was one of the major components of why we went biodynamic. And we had seen it in a few areas where I worked in California. They were farming biodynamically, so I was exposed to it there. And there's a lot of vineyards in France that actually farm this way, that they're very small properties. So that was our kind of inspiration. We also felt like if we had workers out in our vineyards, we wanted to make sure that we had the healthiest environment for them to work in, and we just didn't feel like conventional farming was allowing for that. So not only giving back to the land, but also helping our employees work in a safer environment. And you guys, when you come to the tasting room and to our vineyards, we wanted to make sure that that was a healthy place for you guys to be as well. So there's a lot to biodynamics. I won't explain it all today, but in a general nutshell, biodynamics is taking your farm and having it be an entire ecosystem. So you're looking at your farm as its own entity, its own sort of life force that pulls the energy from the universe and brings it down into its land, into its earth, to help grow good fruit. So you do a few things with the moon, with the lunar cycles. A lot of what we spray on the vineyard are natural, what we call preparations. So cow manure, silica is one of them. If you guys haven't been out yet for our equinox parties, we do one in the spring and one in the fall, and that's when we dig up our cow horns. This spring, so in a few weeks, March 20th, we will be digging up our cow horns, which have our cow manure that we put in the fall, and that will get taken out and mixed in our mixer with water, and we will spray that on our grapes. And what we will put back in a few weeks is silica, and that helps. So that has been sitting out, it's been absorbing energy from the sun, and we'll bring that energy down into the soil when it's buried. So it's all very kind of basic concepts when you look at the universe, energy. There is a reason why we have a lunar calendar, seasons, and a lot of this farming just follows with those seasons. Rudolf Steiner was the quote-unquote father of biodynamics, and he also wrote, came up with Waldorf education, if you guys are familiar with that. It's similar to Montessori education. So he was a very kind of new age thinker, but also took a lot from history and the old world. And the reason why he came up with biodynamics and the philosophy is because a lot of farmers during, when chemicals were coming about, they realized that their crops were not doing so well, so he created this system of farming that they followed and in turn had healthier fruit. So it's been around since about the 1920s, really gained traction in the 1930s and 40s, and now it's sort of seen a resurgence, and there's quite a few properties in Europe that follow it, and I think Kathy said we're only one of a few that follow it in Washington State, and one of only 2 that are actually certified. So that's on the farming side of it. On the winemaking side, so I think we're one of the only certified biodynamic wineries in Washington State. And so on the winemaking side, it has to be 100% native fermentations. You cannot add anything. They don't even allow you to add any water, nothing. I mean, it's what you get from the field is what you get for the wine. So it's a very, very just natural process. It's how wine was made thousands of years ago, and we are following that process and, really just kind of fermentation assistance. We don't really do a lot. We just kind of follow the natural process and guide it along its way. And because of those principles, we feel like we're getting really a good expression of what the land is giving us. So it's a fun way to make wine. It's kind of a little bit of a nerve-wracking way to make wine, but we've been doing it since 2012, so we're much more familiar with the process now and much more comfortable with it. And so that's why you guys are getting a Malbec today. We're originally doing Cabernet, and we have the La Haute Cuvée, which I think you guys have tasted before, and but now we've branched out and done some Syrah and Malbec. That's sort of the history of why we started, and we felt like we couldn't really farm biodynamically and not make wines that way, because when you think about it, the more natural you are out in the field, the more natural you want your product to be. To really just get what the land is giving you. And we have seen, it's a struggle when you first start. And so we saw some transition in the vineyard. It's like anything, if you've been following one diet for a while and you switch, or your body goes on antibiotics, or you get a vaccine or whatever, your body's gonna go through a little bit of a shift. And it's the same with transitioning your vineyard to a different style of farming. So it took a few years to get us a nice healthy vineyard, and now our vineyard, you can tell, is thriving. It's sort of managing itself, and that's the whole goal, is not doing so many inputs and creating an ecosystem that can kind of farm its own, create balance, create harmony. And of course, we step in from time to time and do our preparations, but for the most part, we're just letting things kind of happen out there. So I did want to talk about the wines next, so in case you guys had any questions, and of course tasting the wines is the most fun part of these things. So we're going to start with the Syrah. The Biodynamic Syrah is, if you guys have been to the chateau, we have some pretty cool head train vines along the driveway, and so that's where we get this Syrah from. There's a lower yield, it's a higher density planting, so we actually get less tons per acre on that block than we do with our normal trellis style. And if you guys ever come out here, we'll tell you the real story of why we started the head train vines. It's kind of a funny story. But we found, because we've done that, the grapes that we get from there are really concentrated because of the lower yield and the higher density. And they just create really dark fruit intense fruit, and you're already used to Red Mountain fruit. It is dark and intense already, and it just sort of magnifies that. And then, as I said, Hedges Vineyard was planted in '91, and we started the conversion for biodynamics in 2007. So these vines have been farmed biodynamically for quite a while now, and they're really starting to come into their own. So that's why we decided to make the Biodynamic Syrah out of that. So go ahead and give it a try. I'm sure you guys have been tasting already. This is our 2017 vintage. The 2017 vintage started off really, really cold. It was in the upper teens for most of January, which we don't usually see here. We usually have kind of a mild January and then a little bit chillier December and actually February. So to have the cold January was quite a blow. It did dip into the negatives for a few days, but luckily the vines were kind of not asleep at that point, but comfortably tucked away, so the cold temperatures didn't affect them too much. We did end up pruning a little bit later that year because, of course, we don't want our vineyard crew out there in the freezing cold. So weather affects everything from when we get started in the growing season to when we end the growing season, and also when we can actually get out there and do the work. So as I said, the biodynamic process, you can't really do anything. The pick date is very important with biodynamic wines because you're not allowed to make any adjustments in the cellar. So I tend to sample the biodynamic blocks more intensely than I do the other fruit, just because I can't do anything. So once it comes in, that's sort of it. So pH is very important. I look for balance and acidity, especially with wines that I know are gonna be 100% that varietal. And when I talk about blending next month, we'll talk about why we do that and creating harmony through blends. But if you're just doing a single varietal, you're a little bit more kind of stuck with what you get. So, especially with small blocks like this. And sometimes I'll go in and actually pick the same fruit at 2 different times if I feel like it's ready, but I kind of want to see what else it's going to do. So you can play around a little bit with single varietals, but as I said, you're kind of, what you get is what you get, especially with biodynamic. What I notice on biodynamic Syrah versus conventional Syrah is kind of more of a deep, earthy flavor. We do still see some of that blueberry tart fruit, but I really do feel like the biodynamic wines give you sort of an earthiness, like almost you can taste the land, and I know that sounds really cheesy, but it is true. You can taste sort of that earthiness. I get a little bit of an herbal character, white pepper, which is one of my favorite qualities of Syrah, which you don't get all the time, so I do taste that in this. And because we're on Red Mountain and because we have a lot of structure in the wines, you do get a Syrah that's nicely structured, full-bodied, and we have a question. When do I like to pick Syrah? I'm glad you asked that because Syrah is one of those grapes that I call, it's very based on winemaker influence, and when you pick it, you can get very different wines. Cabernet, you're typically gonna see ripen at the end of the season. Syrah, you can pick early September, you can wait till early October. It's very much affected by when the winemaker picks the wine. So I like to pick it on the earlier side. I feel like Syrah in our climate does have kind of a gamey, smoky quality to it already, so I don't want to enhance that too much by picking too late. I like to blend that with sort of the earlier picked profiles of tart fruits. So we do pick a little bit earlier just to retain a little bit of acid, get those nice bright fruit characters, and it tends to pair really well with sort of that smoky, gamey quality that you get with Syrah. Do you guys have any comments on what you taste in this, how you're liking it?
Go ahead. Pam has another question, and she says, is there a Brix you prefer?
Brix wise, I will pick Syrah as early as 22.5 Brix. For rosé, we actually pick the Syrah around 19.5 to 20 bricks. Sometimes it gets a little higher than that, but yeah, so on the earlier side, anywhere from 22.5 to 23. I do like to see a little bit of shrivel on the grapes. So the Syrah grapes are interesting because they have sort of a football shape. They're not totally round. And then once they start to get just a little bit of shrivel on them is kind of the sweet spot for when you want to pick them. And that usually happens around 24 and a half bricks. So I do like the earlier picked Syrah. And our DLD Syrah, which I think you guys are familiar with, I will pick that vineyard over the course of probably 2.5 to 3 weeks. And you just get a bunch of different profiles of Syrah. So that's a really fun one to blend and play around with. This one I usually pick at one time. Because we have a few different areas of these head train vines on the property, we tend to get slightly different ripening levels. So we do get sort of a range of what the fruit character is just within that one pick date. One other thing about Syrah that I wanted to mention, talking about winemaker influence, oak is a huge influencer on wine. I don't like to use a lot of oak on Syrah. I feel like it overpowers the wine a little bit too much. So we're very lenient on the oak. This one is about 56% new oak, so I would say that's about the highest that I'll go with Syrah. And I do like a lot of American oak on Syrah. This year, the 2017, I did a little bit more French oak. So, and as I said, making this in a biodynamic way is a little bit new for us. I think 2016 was our first vintage that we did that. So we're still kind of in experimental phase on what barrels we like. We're actually doing barrel trials right now in the winery and kind of deciding which barrels go well with which fruit and which wines. So it's kind of like cooking. You have your spices. Certain spices go well with certain foods. It's the same thing with barrels. They can add anywhere from heavy spice, heavy toast, to smoke, to maple, all the way onto your sweeter, vanillas, chocolates. We get a lot of cinnamon from our oak, which I really like. I think it pairs well with our wines. So in the world of barrels, there's probably, I don't know, over 1,000 different kinds you can pick from toast levels to forests to all that kind of stuff. So doing barrel trials is really important, and especially on the biodynamic wines, because since you're not allowed to add anything to the wines, the barrels are kind of the biggest influencer that you can have on those. Any other comments on the Syrah before we move on to the Malbec?
Wondering if you have any herbs planted around, because we were tasting a little bit of like thyme or rosemary. Didn't know if that pulled in. We also noted a little bit of like saltwater and olive. I'd be curious to hear what other flavors, whatever notes people picked up.
I do get what I just call like a herbal component to Syrah sometimes, and definitely the olive. We've actually been tasting some of that in our barrel trials, and yeah, so it's, each different grape variety has its own sort of mix of compounds, and wine grapes are the only fruit that take on characteristics of other things. So depending on when you pick it, how those compounds react with other compounds in the barrel during fermentation, you're gonna get all these different flavors. So I'm glad you said olive, because not a lot of people can pick that up, so that's really good.
Does biodynamic change the barrel choice?
Yes. We are still sort of learning about that. So originally when we made the Biodynamic Cabernet, we did all neutral barrel. We didn't want the barrels to influence the wine at all, because we were still kind of learning about what the wines could do. And so, on Cabernet, it's pretty weird to have 100% neutral, and we were pretty happy with how the wine turned out. And then slowly but surely we started adding in more oak, and now I'm really comfortable with the profile of our Biodynamic Cabernet, that I actually like to use quite a bit of French oak on it and age it longer. I think that the Red Mountain wines in general lend themselves well to a lot of barrel age. Nothing crazy. I mean, we're not aging for like 3 years or anything. It's more, you know, we're in the 22 to 26 month range with the biodynamic cab. So yeah, it affects it in the sense that, like I said, it's the only thing that you're really adding to the wine that can really change its character. So the other lots that I do that are made more in a conventional style, that being said, we really don't add a lot to any of our wines. The conventional wines, we will trial some yeast on and do things like that, but it's nothing like your insane chemicals that some people add, and I'm not going to talk about that because it scares me. Yeah, so those ones I play around a little bit more with. Especially, you know, the biodynamic wines we're making into specific products. So some of our wines that we do, I'm not quite sure if they're going to go into the Hedges Estate blend or the DLD Syrah or the Estate Cab. So there's a little bit more leeway to kind of have fun and play around with those. These wines, the Malbec, the Syrah, the Biodynamic Cab, I kind of know what wines those are going to become, and so I'm looking for a specific, not a specific profile, but I'm really paying attention to every year which barrels I'm liking with that. So yeah, I'm a little bit more conscious when I choose barrels for these.
When do you think the Syrah or the Malbec will be best?
So for all the Red Mountain wines, I think that, you know, they're really good young, and they give you certain characteristics and nuances that you get out of young wines. They can be a little intense at the beginning and maybe a little tight as far as tannins and structure and mouthfeel. I really like to taste them about 3 to 4 years after they've been bottled, and then again at 10 years. I think that sort of 7 to 10 years is the sweet spot for our wines. But again, I really enjoy tasting them young too, because they're so different. I don't think I've actually had a wine from the Hedges Estate from Red Mountain that is over the hill yet, and we're going way back to 92, 93. So the tannins on Red Mountain, the acid on Red Mountain, all of that stuff lends itself well to long ageability. Syrah, we're still kind of playing around with. We made our first DLD Syrah in 2008, so we have a pretty good history on that wine now, and those wines are tasting great, so I think those could go for another 5 years. But what's nice is that we do hold back quite a bit of wine at the winery, and we will re-release later so that you guys don't have to worry about storing and cellaring. And you'll see, you know, Kathy every once in a while have, you know, an old product for sale. So we store them nicely here. They age really well, and so I'm really excited to see how these biodynamic wines age, because if you think about it, they're unfiltered. Biodynamic wines are still kind of a living entity in the bottle, so those are going to change and morph quite a bit more than your conventional wines. If there's no other questions, I'll move on to the Malbec. And you can notice right away the Malbec has really nice color. One thing I will mention about Malbec versus Syrah, they actually grow fairly similarly, but Malbec has very large round berries. Most look like Concord grapes. If you guys have ever seen those berries, they're very large, very round, and Malbec looks quite a bit like that. And Malbec also has very thin skins. So one of the telltale signs to know if Malbec's ripe is if you go out and sample the vineyard, the skins just sort of fall off. So that's one of the signs that I look for when I pick Malbec. And I usually like to see Malbec, since you asked about bricks on the Syrah, around 23.5 to 24.5 bricks. Malbec, if it's picked, so this is a wine, unlike Syrah, where if you pick it too early or too late, you're gonna lose a lot of that Malbec character. There is a sweet spot, I think, for Malbec around 24.5 bricks. And if you pick it a lot earlier than that, you can tend to get sort of like a grassy hay character, which is not very appealing. If you pick it too late, it sort of just turns into a big ball of mush. So yeah, and I'm mentioning bricks, but at the same time, it's not really how we base our picking decisions. We sample, we bring the grapes into the winery, we crush them, we test them, but we also taste. And taste is how I make my decisions. So if I look at the sheet and the numbers are there, but it doesn't taste right, I won't pick it yet. So sometimes the numbers are great and you're just like, it's not there yet. And sometimes I'll taste the wine without looking at the numbers and be like, oh, this is ready to go. And the bricks are way low or high, or so it's, flavor is definitely, taste is very important. My uncle used to say when I worked with him, you don't drink the numbers, which is true. So we focus on flavor quite a bit. So the Malbec, again, you'll notice the bright color. I don't know if you guys are very familiar with Malbec from around the world. There are certain areas that grow quite a bit of it. Argentina is one of them. And depending on where it's grown, elevation-wise, you can either get a wine that is kind of a little bit flatter, but very jammy, very fruity, versus a wine that, or the grapes, if they're grown in a higher elevation and have more difference between the daytime and nighttime temps, you retain a lot more acid, you get a little bit more structure, and definitely a lot more color. So we're sort of mid-range in there. We're in our elevation, but we do have quite a big temperature difference between our daytime and nighttime temps, about 40 degrees during the growing season, so, or during the maturation period during harvest. And so we do get quite a bit of acid retention, a lot of color, and I think Malbec is a really fun wine, especially from here. We really enjoy making it. You get some floral notes, you can get some kind of blackberry jam, black pepper, there's licorice. You can kind of sometimes get that sweet grassy character, not so much hay, but almost kind of like an herbal, sweet herbal character. And it's just a really fun wine. And because of that acid and sort of shorter finish, it does pair really well with food, I think. This is the 2018. It's still a very fresh, young wine. The difference, I think, between the Syrah and Malbec, you can tell that age difference just within 1 year. The Syrah is slightly more kind of refined from that extra age, and the Malbec, I think, is still sort of this young, fun, you know, I would say the Malbec's kind of in its 20s and the Syrah's in its 30s or 40s, a little bit more mature. But again, Malbec is, it should be a fun wine, I think, and as it ages, it does become a little bit more serious, but always good with food. I love Malbec with food. Barbecue, yeah, any type of kind of meats, and so it's a good wine. How are you guys liking the Malbec? Good? Do you guys have any questions or comments? What are you guys tasting in this wine?
Somebody asked when we choose to make them, basically, and I just told them we make them every year almost, but we just don't release them, but you can elaborate.
Yeah, so we, over the years, Malbec is a classic blending grape in Bordeaux, which is originally why we planted it. But over the years, we've come to see that Malbec on its own, especially where it's planted here, is pretty special. So we have made Malbec in the past as a limited varietal. We do have some old Malbecs in the cellar that maybe we'll release at some point. I think they're probably tasting really good right now. Actually, next month for our AVA Alliance, I'm doing a Zoom tasting on a 2011 Malbec, so that should be pretty interesting and pretty fun. And then, so this is also, I didn't mention, grown in the same head train style that the Syrah is. So it's also a little bit lower yield. But I think we'll keep making Malbec, and actually I'm really liking the one that we harvested in 2020. So I'm thinking that's gonna be our bottle your own wine this year for anyone who's come to the winery and do that. We bottle them in magnums, they're really fun. So there's one lot of Malbec this year that is just so good, I don't wanna see it go anywhere except in a large format bottle. So that's gonna happen. But yeah, so we appreciate Malbec as a single varietal. It does add quite a bit to the Hedges Estate Red Blend. So if you look on the back label, you'll see that Malbec is usually in there. And it does add that little bit of color, a little bit of acid, sort of that bright fruit character, but a little goes a long way. So we just use it as sort of a hint of flavor. So a little bit of a blending component. Both Syrah and Malbec, if they are added to a Cabernet blend, both of them a little bit goes a long way. So we don't like to overpower sort of our classic blend that we like to make, but a little bit of an addition of that is really nice.
I might be, well, I'm finding that I know Malbec is my favorite varietal, and I'm really able to discern some differences between the Malbec and the Syrah today. I'm not very good at that part, but I'm just, the mouthfeel on the Malbec is really nice, I think, and I'm almost getting a kind of a sweet fullness at the end.
Yeah, so it does tend to have sort of kind of, I call it like a juicy quality. It doesn't have very much tannin, which you're probably getting out of the Syrah. Because the skins are so thin, you don't get a lot of that tannin extraction in the Malbec. So it's a nice, light, but kind of fulfilling and juicy wine. You know more than you think. Who out of the group is preferring one wine over the other? You like Malbec, right? Yeah. All right, we're gonna do a show of hands. Who is really loving the Syrah today? Okay. And then Malbec lovers? Oh, wow, okay. Yeah, so these are, you know, I kind of consider Malbec a little bit on the exotic side, and it's definitely a really fun wine to make, and I hope to see it more made as a biodynamic wine. And I'll explain a little bit how I do the native ferments. I do go out in the vineyard about a week before harvest and pick a bucket of grapes and kind of smash those around and get a little bucket ferment going. And as long as that's healthy, I know that, you know, it's like my little starter that I can add to all of these tanks. So once we get that starter going, we're pretty set for harvest, and we'll just keep feeding that starter fresh juice, adding it to tanks, and it's kind of like how I do my sourdough bread. I have a starter that I feed, I use that to make the bread. So it's the same concept, and with those fermentations, you're gonna get a lot more yeast and bacteria fermenting. There's just a lot more going on. You're gonna get more layers of flavor because of all those different yeast and bacteria in there, versus a wine that you just threw a bag of yeast in. You're gonna get sort of more of a singular, angular profile. So these wines are fun because you never really know what you're gonna get with biodynamics, and sometimes you cross your fingers and hope for the best, and like I said, we're just sort of guiding them along. So it's more interesting way to make wine. You know, you kind of feel like you're connected to the past a little bit, making wines this way, and but in the end, I think they produce a really great product, and they're quite different than some of the other things that we do. Okay, so I got a question. Is the biodynamic process more time consuming? Are there any risks? Yes, and yes. I would say it's both time consuming on the vineyard side and on the winemaking side, just from the standpoint of you have to observe more, you have to pay more attention, you are learning every single year. You know, agriculture and fermentation in general are never the same from year to year. So biodynamics sort of takes that to the extreme. You really need to walk your vineyard rows, pay attention to what's going on. You know, the weather can really affect agriculture and vines, and if you're in a conventional vineyard, your response is to just spray something. If you're in a biodynamic vineyard, you know, it's almost like you have to walk and talk to your vines, and you know, it's how much do you want to pay attention to the thing that you're growing and creating. And on a biodynamic level, you're paying attention quite a bit. And on the winemaking side, you know, I'm out there earlier doing my starter buckets. We are constantly sampling, constantly tasting, with both biodynamic and conventional. But biodynamics, I'm tasting, I find more, because they can change from hour to hour, versus the other wines seem to change day to day. But they are still living products, and you're never going to get the same thing twice. And that's, I think, one of the hardest parts about winemaking in general is it is an art, but you never quite get the same ingredients from year to year. So you're sort of starting from scratch all the time. You feel like you're starting from ground zero all the time. So it's, you know, and then it keeps changing in the bottle. So you might bottle it and it's not going to taste the same next year. So you have to be really comfortable with being a little bit less in control. And, you know, I luckily am not control freak or a perfectionist. So I think the biodynamic wines lend more to my style in person, you know, as a person, as a winemaker. And so I'm excited to continue with it and go in that direction. Is there a concerted effort amongst Washington vintners that Malbec is actually a good fit in Washington? Yes. About 10 years ago, 12 years ago, Malbec was sort of talked about as the next big thing, and not only in Washington, but around the world as a single varietal. And so more of it was planted in Washington, and I think we're starting to see now that those higher elevation spots are really growing the best Malbec. And I've seen a lot of winemakers who make wines in a more modern style with other varietals, but with Malbec, they really hold back and stay true to more of a traditional style of winemaking. So I think that is a little bit of the reason why Malbec is gaining more attention, is because it's a little bit more of a hands-off wine. It's more true to itself. It doesn't get made in a lot of different styles like Cabernet or Merlot does. And so people gravitate towards it because it just feels fresh and more natural. And I was good friends with Ashley Trout. I don't know if you had any of her Malbecs out of Walla Walla, but she sort of paved the way quite a while ago. She was all Malbec all the time, and so I think she brought a lot of Malbec to the forefront, and so it's exciting to see more of that happen, because I really love it. I think it's a great varietal. Has anyone gone back to the Syrah after the Malbec? Does it taste different to you guys? I feel like the Malbec is very bright and almost very intensely aromatic. The Syrah seems a lot more mellow now than when I first tasted it.
I almost felt like the Malbec was more tannic at first, but now going back to the Syrah, I'm getting way more tanned. But I feel like the Syrah, like you said, I feel like I'm getting more of the coffee and caramely flavors out of the Syrah now.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just there.
So what happens as you taste wines and they sit in your glass, so your nose actually fatigues to certain flavors or aromatics, and some aromatics it fatigues to a little bit faster. So if there were some commonalities between the Malbec and Syrah, and you kind of keep going back and forth, you're going to fatigue to some of those. And then you're going to start picking up nuances in the wine that you didn't pick up in the first place. So now the Syrah, to me, it was a little bit fruitier at the beginning, but after smelling the Malbec, which is a little bit more intense on the fruit side, I think, now I'm going back to the Syrah and getting some of those underlying, like coffee, almost caramel, orange peel, a little bit of character, but it creates almost a darker profile on the Syrah. Yeah, and as you keep tasting wines, your palate adjusts to what the wines are doing. So as you keep tasting, your mouth is going to get a little bit drier from the tannins, and so as you keep drinking the wines, they're going to seem a little bit more tannic as you go along, but also acid affects how you perceive tannin, alcohol affects that as well. So all these things in the wine that are having a play are just constantly changing in the glass too. So I just got a comment from my friends on the side here, and they said boysenberry ice cream. Is anyone getting that? No?
I'll just read my comment. The Malbec has this really just like super juicy kind of red plum flavor, and of course like contrasted by the Syrah, which is just has this weight to it, and also has this like kind of smoky herbal characteristic too. They couldn't be more different. I love them both, but I am partial to Syrah, so.
Okay, yeah, and that's spot on. Malbec is usually a very kind of juicy, jammy fruit character, and Syrah can tend to have that herbal smoky quality. I'm with you. I'm a huge Syrah gal.
What did you study in school to be such an expert in this?
I have a business degree and a minor in philosophy, but no, I ended up going back to school for winemaking. I actually took the local courses at Wazoo. I did not know that this was going to be my path, even though it's my family's winery. So yeah, just kind of fell back into it and worked at wineries in California and learned along the way. And you know, it's a lot of on the job and school at the same time. But yeah, so you know, I think if you're passionate about something, it sort of lives in your head and you can't get away from it. So you're constantly reading about it, and the practical application is really the biggest learning point. All right, well, if there aren't any more questions, I just want to thank you guys, and we really do appreciate all your support. Well, hopefully you guys learned stuff today that you haven't heard from us before, especially about the biodynamic winemaking and growing. And I'm hoping we'll do a few more of these and get a little bit more in depth on biodynamics. It's a fascinating topic, and it really does produce wines that are very different than your conventional products. So we appreciate you guys doing the Zoom today. Keep drinking Hedges wine, Washington wine, and biodynamics. Cheers, guys. Thank you, Mina and Blanc and Rouge Wine Shop, for having us on today, and we hope you really enjoyed the wines and learning about biodynamics. We thank you very much for supporting local wine shops and also drinking Washington State wine. Thank you, and cheers.